Hi, I'm Rob Stevenson, founder of InsideOut. Welcome to our series of video interviews with senior role models who are sharing their experiences of being open about mental ill health in the workplace and the positive impact that can have on our workplace cultures. Today we're with Mark Twigg and Rob Agnew from Cicero, and we're going to share details of their experiences.
I think it was a sense that I'd lived with it for 25 years and I hadn't done a very good job of managing it. So I'd gone through lots of cycles, ups and downs, living with depression after my father died. And I was very conscious of the fact that the workforce at Cicero is very young, a lot of millennials, a lot of people who potentially have similar things going on in their lives. And we hadn't created a culture where people could talk about that. And I thought, well, if I hadn't talked about it and did a bad job of it, then there's every chance that the generation of people who are working at Cicero who are younger than me are in the same place. So I wanted to address that. Well, I probably spent quite a few years thinking about it. And by the time we made that decision, by the time we rolled it out within the company, I didn't really have any reservations. I think a lot of people I speak to, senior managers in other companies, have this thought in the back of their minds that if they're open about their own mental health, then it might impact on their relationship with their employees. They might lose respect, they might lose trust. It might make it difficult for clients to trust them or respect them. There's this sense, I think, that if you've got a human frailty that affects your mind, that you'll be considered less of a professional, less reliable somehow. From my perspective, I thought the cost of not doing it is greater. I think we've actually built a lot of trust and respect because people recognise that their employer values them as human beings. The senior management taking leadership is critical because if that's happening at the board level, and you've got senior executives saying to the whole company, this is the kind of company we are, and this is how we want to work, then it takes away all of the concerns internally. One of the problems we had in the old regime, if you like, is people didn't feel like they could talk about it. So it made it very difficult as a manager to know what you were managing. And I think having gone through the process of opening up, getting rid of the stigma, having those conversations. In one case, we were able to have a dialogue indirectly with the counsellor to get the counsellor's perspective on what we should be doing differently. And that kind of support has made a big difference to that person's working life. And I think in terms of my own experience, the fact that I no longer have to think about my mental health as a consideration in the workplace, it's just one more thing in the background that I have to manage. It doesn't become the elephant in the room that it used to be. So those fluctuations that I used to have are now much less present.
So my first engagement with Mark was actually in a potential client-supplier relationship, me being on the supplier side of that, and we struck up a conversation fairly early on about workplace culture, and we delved a little bit deeper into that, and both sort of shared our personal stories and trials with mental ill health, and Mark spoke about exactly what he did within the organisation, speaking out about his own challenges, and he told me about the programme that was in place. It's such an important part of my life and working life to make sure that my mental health is taken care of as a priority. So yes, it fundamentally impacted my decision to join Cicero. Being open about it during the interview process is easy when you know that the person responsible for your employment is very, very open about their own mental health. Being transparent about that and being able to tell people that I had bipolarism phenomenally easy. And the reaction that I received from every other staff member that was involved in my interview process was exactly that of Mark. So it wasn't a barrier at all. If anything, you felt like there was something you could be involved in with the company from day one.
And it was a bit of a learning curve for me as well, because I'd never recruited someone who was openly dealing with bipolarism. And it is one of those conditions that you don't really know much about. It's not really something that is commonly understood. And I think that's one of the big learning curves. As managers, you can put these things in place, but then you've got to be sympathetic and you've got to be empathetic about what you're dealing with. You can't say, let's allow people to bring their whole self to work and then not really understand what that means in practice. The reality is 17 million people in the UK work in SMEs, and if SMEs are not part of the conversation, then that's 17 million people missing out. So my passionate belief is you've got to create something that works for the SME community. If small businesses can do it, then everyone can do it. A lot of the things that big companies do involve budgets and big teams or the facilities. And I think getting the small business community more involved in that conversation, getting government to think more about what small businesses can do and how government can support that, I think is absolutely vital. And from our perspective, being small actually made us nimble. There were things we could do very quickly that changed the culture in a really fundamental way. It's all very well and good having these great programs and packaging it all into your HR and your CSR and all the rest of it. But what we did was about 80, 90 people sitting in a room together and saying, we're going to change the way we work. And you have that conversation on day one, and by day two, things are changing. A few other things we've done, we brought in a policy a couple of years ago called Take Two, which was about saying to everyone, once a week for 2 hours, you can go off and please yourself. So come in late, go home early, have a long lunch, go to the gym, just find time for yourself. It's not about your boss, it's not about your clients, it's about you getting more of a balance between the work and the leisure, and introducing that into your working day a little bit more. Because one of the things that we're very much not about is a long hours culture, and getting people to take the rest, the relaxation, which is a fundamental part of wellness. Keeping your mind healthy means switching off. And we don't want people who are tied to their desks for 12 hours a day. We want people who can mix it up and find time for themselves. So the take-up of that programme has been near universal.
I need your loving, baby, pour your love over me. Come a little closer, darling, pour your love over me. You're driving me crazy, pour your love over me. I need your love.